Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's Lean Publishing tip of the day, where I'm going to be talking about the rather interesting and for some people controversial question about whether or not you should sell your book to libraries. I apologize for the background noise. There's some awful beeping from a machine um, that we got no notice about. This is obviously, if you listen to podcasts or anything, you're familiar with the fact that, if I were somewhere else, it would be police siren or something like that. But hopefully, when we produce the audio, we'll be able to get rid of the annoying background noise, and hopefully, it won't be too bad for the few people who manage to be listening to this live. Um, as always, if you're watching the recording, please skip ahead to the 2-minute mark. We just use the first 2 minutes to do a little housekeeping and give people some time to join. There's also a blog post that accompanies every single one of these Lean Publishing Tip of the Day videos, which you can find on our blog at leanpub.com/blog. If you don't see it there, just click on the magnifying glass that you'll find at the top right and search for the keywords, and you should find the blog post pretty easily. And of course, you'll have links in there and stuff like that to helpful articles. This particular blog post has a few more links than usual, so you might want to go there and find it. Of course, the recording, if you found it, if you've either found it on our website or you found it on our YouTube channel, if you found it on YouTube, please subscribe and like and all that, comment and all that kind of stuff. Our YouTube channel has a lot more videos. It has book launch videos, podcast videos, some explainer videos, some new release videos and stuff like that. And we're adding new videos all the time. It's a really great way. Our YouTube channel is a really great way to discover new books and authors. And if you're an author yourself or an aspiring author yourself, it's a good way to learn about, book marketing and, being a member of the Leanpub self-publishing community and all that kind of stuff. So with all that said, let me just do the little 2-minute countdown of 3, 2, 1. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the 2-minute mark of today's Lean Publishing Tip of the Day, where we're going to be talking about the question of whether or not you should sell your book to libraries. This is kind of, if you're new to the self-publishing world, if you're new to the book world of books in itself, thinking about it, obviously, probably been around books one way or another your whole life, but um, the question of whether or not you should sell your book to libraries is actually a controversial one in some circles. The book publishing world, like any world you kind of find your way into, you'll discover surprisingly things that you didn't think would be controversial are incredibly controversial within it. And library book sales and library book lending is no exception to that. To begin with, our position at Leanpub is that it's up to you. We love libraries, and if you're a self-published author and you've got a self-published book and it's for sale on Leanpub, and a library approaches us, which they do, asking us if they can buy a book and add it to their library collection, what we do is we point them to this article, where we say, we love libraries. And as a library, I'm not going to say but, and as a library, what you need to do if you want to get a Leanpub book, a book that you've discovered on Leanpub into your collection, is you need to go contact the author directly and arrange the purchase with them. Um, uh, and we actually have an article that's very easy to find. There's actually a few articles about this, but we make it easy to try to contact Leanpub authors as well. So we point people who are from libraries asking us if they can buy a Leanpub book for their collection. We point them to that article. That article points them to this article, which tells them how they can contact you. And if you're a Leanpub author and you do get contacted like this, then we recommend that you just kind of negotiate with the library. You can just ignore the email if you want to. You can reply and find out how it all works and stuff like that. Then you're going to be negotiating with the library directly. That actually leads to the one kind of caveat that I talk about whether or not, like, I personally think authors should get their books into as many libraries as they can. I think it's a no-brainer, for what to me are obvious reasons. But again, there's one caveat that I'll get to in a bit. So going back to our blog post. So if it seems obvious to you, why shouldn't I love libraries. As a kid, you probably spent some time in a school library or public library and stuff like that. As an adult, you may have done so as well. If you're an academic type, if you've done any kind of serious research at all in your life, libraries will be an obviously important part of your world. There's little libraries like the Library of Congress, and there's libraries like the British Library and the Bodleian Library in the UK that are basically copyright libraries. If you publish a book in those countries, you have to send a copy to those libraries because they're important records of what people are writing and publishing and saying and stuff like that. And I think it's obvious that most authors would want their books to be in libraries like that as well, to be discoverable by people, so that people who are interested in learning about your subject or reading your plot, learning about your characters, etc., your fiction style, and people would that would be available to them. Um, but there are people who object to this. They object to library selling books to libraries in general. Now that doesn't mean in principle. There are people there that they might say, well, for the right price, and that's the issue. Basically, is that there are people who believe that library sales. I don't know why this is jumping around. If you're looking at my screen, there are people who believe that basically book lending libraries diminish. They'll always couch it in terms of authors' sales and revenue and income. Of course, it's authors typically get a kind of very small proportion of a book's sale amount. So you might want to ask yourself whose interests are really being served by people who object to having books sold to libraries. Um, there's some infamous cases of book publishing executives, not surprisingly, also objecting to this. I remember one particular book publishing executive who seemed to imply that libraries were communist, which was incredible. But there you go. It's a big world out there. Um, anyway, the objection is basically that library lending means fewer book sales. That's as straightforward an argument as I guess someone could make. There are many reasons to object to that objection to book library sales. One of which is basically discovery. If you're literacy would be another one. Um, uh, and there's, a lot of the same objections would be in the same spirit of the way you object to people who claim that piracy diminishes book sales, for example. There's people who are kind of like think the world is way too straightforward. They think that because they can do a certain kind of direct kind of calculating in their head that this must be kind of realistic, way of looking at the world. I couldn't disagree more. And in particular, with respect to library sales, that's just the case. We had a guest on our podcast years ago, this was a long time ago, back in 2018, named Rebecca Giblin. She was, doing an entire kind of research thing on like the library sales data and what they mean. It's incredibly complicated. It's incredibly not transparent, which again relates to my caveat about whether or not you should sell books to libraries that I'll get to. If you want a more recent, and this is just, very recent article, the North American book industry expert Jane Friedman recently had an article out called "I Wouldn't Blame Libraries for Declining Author Income." Jane is basically replying to the Authors Guild, which is this, notionally pro-author organization based in the United States, who seem to be saying that, library lending is going to diminish your sales as an author. Obviously, I completely disagree with that. But if you're fair enough, if you want to believe that, or if you feel you have good reason to, and I want to point you to this article. It's linked to from Jane's article, and where you can see the kind of case that's being made on that side of things. What the reason people get so passionate about this is because people do get passionate about author incomes and stuff like that. They see it as a kind of proxy for the health of a culture. If they really cared about author incomes, I think people like that would look more into what proportion of, like I said, of a book's sale price that you pay actually goes to the author. On Leanpub, where we say it right there on our landing page for the book, we show you how much the author earns. You will not find that on basically any other bookstore model, and there's a reason for that. It's because the author's actually making only a tiny portion of that money for themselves, if they ever get it at all, which is not as rare a thing as it should be. One thing when it comes to this question is that, it's like I mentioned, discovery, basically. If your book is in a library, it's in a library catalog, it's discoverable by category, et cetera. It's discoverable by people in all kinds of ways. There might be people who if you've published more than one book, they might, if you want to do the kind of like that kind of, I think, um, uh, mistaken form of kind of calculating, you might want to say, oh, maybe if they borrow my book from a library, they might buy other books of mine. Totally true. Um, they might just see your name on the shelf though and see, oh, an author whose name I recognize, and then they might, you know, uh, attend a book reading that you do at some point, or they might, hire you as a consultant or something like that. Having your books in libraries is just an incredibly positive thing in my view, for authors, and it's something you should do with, again, the caveat. And so let me get to that. So, one experience we had a long time ago was, well, at least I'll say I had at Leanpub. This is all anecdotal, but one day we got a very long email from someone at some library somewhere, a library employee who had taken our entire terms of service and rewritten them, so this would uh, comply with their own purchasing, rules or their institution. As if we would review the this entire legal document, sign it, and then carry out one single sale of one book so that it could be in their library. And obviously, the answer is no. We're not going to do that. And the caveat I'm talking about here, I should have actually said that there are two. The first is that like I said before, library purchasing can be so complex that it can actually be unique to every single library sale that you do. They might want you to sign a contract with them for a single sale of your book. Um, and it might be unique to that library, and you can imagine, is that worth your time to do that? On that note, if you do get approached by a library to do a sale to them, I would recommend you reply by saying, as long as it's very simple, and you should make it as easy for the poor librarian, because don't worry, they're not happy to be in that situation either, that where things are so complex. But you should make it as easy as possible for them. Just say, look, I'd love to have my book in your. This is my recommendation. I'd love to have my book in your library. What's the easiest route to that? And that might mean you just don't care about how they manage your book. And in this case, we're talking about an ebook and an ebook file. You just say, whatever. I've got my files from Leanpub. I can give them to you. You just take them and do whatever you need to do with them. That's what I would recommend. I don't just say, I don't even want to know. If you want to, then you should. If you want to be more careful about it, then you should ask. You should read the fine print, all that kind of stuff. That it might be a unique deal for each library purchase, and so that's the main caveat: is it worth your time? And it might not be. And I'm not normally the kind of person to invoke, what's worth my time and stuff like that. But in this case, if you're going to be as you're going to adopt the kind of policy that you do library sales, make sure that I would highly recommend that simplifying the process, making it as simple and straightforward as possible, would be the best thing to do. The other caveat about library sales is that you're not going to you will it is unlike this is a thing that can be very surprising to people who are unfamiliar with it. You're not going to get 10 times the book sale price. You might get 1.5 or something like that. I think that's often very shocking to people to think, wait a minute, my book can be lent out perhaps in infinite number of times going forward, and I only get like 1.5 times the price. Yeah, that's how library book purchases work. So typically, in my experience, so you're going to want to keep that in mind as well. The reason to get your book into a library, though, is not to directly to make money. It's to have it be in the catalog, be part of your culture, be part of history, and to be discoverable and to make your contribution to the world. That's hopefully the reason you wrote your book in the first place. Um, so I'm just going to stop sharing here. So those are some of my thoughts on whether or not you should sell your book to libraries. My short answer is yes, but with my two caveats. Yeah, you should think about this. It's a very interesting topic. If you want to get into the self-publishing world, and there's sort of finer details about library purchases and stuff like that. Yeah, I recommend it's a very interesting topic, and probably one you should think about looking into. So thanks very much, everyone, for watching this live stream today.